Great. Well, I appreciate everybody taking the time and joining the Lead with Meaning podcast. I'm really excited for the conversation I'm going to have today. My guest today, Dylan Ali. If you haven't, been introduced to him yet, please go on to LinkedIn, check out a lot of his content. He's speaking about areas that are really important to me, like vulnerability, like being your authentic self, like how to truly speak and listen to that inner self that you have. Is known as a wizard, a philosopher, kind of a sales-minded mentor. Dylan, I appreciate you coming on today. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Ali, thank you, man. As I said before, I'm completely delighted and honored to share this space and time with you. So, looking forward to the conversation. I know we're going to chop it up and have a lot of fun, man.
Great. Well, Dylan, you and I are just connected over the last kind of 3 to 6 months, and really my intention on this show is to try to have great conversations with people. And what I personally had found with a big part of my development, it really has kind of an Eastern focus, a spiritual focus. And within the LinkedIn community, there's a lot of great thought leaders that are giving real tangible tactics on how to manage sales and marketing and pipeline and things of that nature. But what I saw really lacking was taking those concepts of mindfulness and meditation and really applying those not just to our work lives, but all encompassing with our personal and our professional lives. And you do a great job talking about being your authentic self. I want to just kind of see and get your input on what that means to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, back to what you talked about, right? So when you look at the corporate space, we often hear things like, um, you know, don't lead with emotions, right? Don't wear your heart on your sleeves. Leave emotions out of it. We're thought to use that masculine mind, that logical mind, and if it can't be calculated, it can't be measured. It has no space. Well, what I found is that you know that led me to unhealthy relationships with alcohol, unhealthy relationships with myself, with my peers, with my family. And in many other cases, it's very, very unhealthy relationships with other destructive mechanisms. And so, as part of my journey, I've really just embarked on that Eastern side. And for me, it was simply just getting to a place where I wanted to find more success. And what I was looking for was a little bit of that Eastern philosophy juju to give me more success. But what I found was my true authentic self, right? And so we are taught to succeed. We are taught how to work. We are taught how to engage. We are taught how to treat people. And it's, the people that we learn these ways of being from, at the end of the day, what I found was I just didn't want to be anything like those people. I wanted the things that they had because I thought it was going to make me happy, but I wanted to be nothing like them because what I recognized is that they were simply a reflection of me, and I didn't like who I was in that moment. So for me, it was, I chased all the external factors. Now it was time to chase the internal factor. And what I found that by embracing the spiritual side of things, by embracing the softer, the feminine energy, that I was able to be more authentic, more vulnerable. And as a result, my EQ went up. And that's simply how we have better peers or better peer interaction. And that's how we have more successful organizations, is how do we use those, or how do we use not only that IQ, but that EQ to navigate the business world, have a softer day, have more happy employees. And by the way, Harvard says that happy employees produce 70% more revenue, right? So it's all back to the bottom line, but I strongly believe that we can have our cake and eat it too. Like, we can literally have everything that we want and enjoy it without the sacrifice or the hustle and grind that we're sold, right?
Wow. You just touched on a lot there, Dylan. Thank you for sharing. One thing that I recently came across, and I don't want to get into a tangent here, was when we look at things like, being happy. We all perform a little bit better when we're happy. Maybe you're in a new relationship, we all know that giddy feeling. Life is just better, right? And there's something called the subconscious scale, where it actually looks at and it grades the different areas of the subconscious. And I don't remember them exactly, but I know that happiness, love, and I think happiness and love sat in the kind of the 500 area. but gratitude, in fact, sat closer to the 900 area on that subconscious scale. So it's really important to be grateful, and not to get in that tangent, but maybe you could touch on a little bit, Dylan, on mindfulness and emotional intelligence and EQ, because these are becoming catchphrases maybe to a lot of folks. We're really aware of what that means, but to be mindful in corporate America, in sales and marketing, it's a high stress environment. Maybe we could correlate this. How do we apply some of those, emotional intelligence, EQ, tactics and tricks to be more present?
Yep. So let's back up, and we kind of talk about happiness, and we talk about that subconscious skill, right? So number one, let's look at the subconscious. The subconscious is that 90% of the wiring or the programming that we operate on, right? The autopilot, if we will. The subconscious is also the 90% of us that is non-physical, right? 100% of us is this, what we think that we see and feel, but 90% of that is this being or energy field, if you will. So now let's just take that and translate it into, happiness, mindfulness, gratefulness, all of those components of your subconscious. What did you call it? Subconscious what?
Your subconscious mind.
Yes, the subconscious mind, right? So all of those elements of the subconscious mind, or the greater part of you that is non-physical, maybe you want to refer to it as your higher self, right? So when you're in tune with that subconscious, when you're in tune with that part of you that is non-physical, when you're in tune with that spirit or that energy, right? You start to operate from this place of authenticity. You start to understand that, we're two beautiful brown men with great beards, but at the end of the day, that's just a surface layer. What we really are is two beautiful, loving beings of light, right? And we're this energetic source. And the more that we can play in that field of happiness, of gratitude, of those higher vibrational frequencies, if you will. So now we're talking a little bit law of attraction, right? What we put out is what we're going to get. So when you're able to emit on those frequencies, you're also going to attract the things that are going to be rebounded or reflected from those frequencies, which means you're going to reflect more positive situations, more positive people, more positive things into your life. All of a sudden that promotion comes out of nowhere. All of a sudden that person that you're looking at, looking for to fill the gap on your team just happens to show up, right? Without any effort, without any work. And so how does all this play? Well, the more and more that you can be in tune with our authentic self means that you've understood that the subconscious is completely separate. So what's going on in the background that's producing these egotistical interactions, you learn to separate it. So number one, you learn to separate the self from the self, if you will, right? And the self from the self that we're talking about is the ego from the true self. And then you really start to understand, going down that mindfulness avenue, you really start to understand who you are. And then you really start to understand that you completely have this full power to do anything that you want, to be anything that you want. And then you see that power within others. And then you start to cultivate that power within others. But en route to that, you learn to separate that state that the person is being or displayed from the person. So now, instead of Ali being a jerk, right, to me, I just realized that maybe he's just feeding that need for significance. Maybe in this moment, he feels fear. Maybe in this moment, he feels anxiety or doubt. And this is the way that his ego is choosing to articulate this, right? And so if I can understand that, then I don't take offense to it, right? Then guess what? I'm not taking it personal. I'm not assuming anything, right? And I'm not shooting from the hip. So when you incorporate, and I said a lot of things in just a few minutes there, right? But if you can incorporate all of these things into your being, then you recognize that you have this higher level of emotional intelligence, and you recognize that now your interactions with your peers and with your subordinates and with your superiors, right, all become a little bit less self-serving, right, and a little bit selfless, or a little bit more selfless.
Wow. You're right. You just touched on a lot there, Dylan. And honestly, as you folks will continue to see during this conversation, you have such a great gift in being able to articulate a message. It's really phenomenal. I'm blessed to have this opportunity to have this dialogue with you. A lot of folks, when we look at things like, being conscious of our energy, the same applies to self-talk or imposter syndrome and being negative as well. So, I think as The Secret and Law of Attraction, became mainstream, I think it did a lot of great things, but it also, it created awareness to energy and the quantum and things like that. But I think at some point, it also allowed people to think, if I just wish upon a star, my magic silver bike is going to show up. And it's not quite like that. We need to do the work. We need to constantly have that positive conversation. And, this is why even it's important, I think, when we look at leaders within that space, negative self-talk can impact you in drastically a huger way than sometimes a positive way. So we need to be conscious of that as well. I know when you and I spoke in the past, Alan, we talked really about how do we get to this point where we're actually starting to listen to ourselves. And for me, born into an Eastern family, I think things like meditation and consciousness were prevalent for a while. But for me, it was kind of a burnout stage that allowed me to start really putting myself first. I know when you and I spoke previously, you had shared a conversation where you were at a trip to Florida, in a gathering of life, so to speak, a celebration of life. And you had an aha moment for yourself personally that shifted things for you to start to listen to that self-talk in a different way, right? I think, just to provide some context, I think all of us are trying to fit in with the Joneses at some point of our life and trying to figure out who are we really. And often there's an inner voice that's trying to guide you, and we may or may not listen to it, right? And some of us were very fortunate and lucky that inner talk, we're able to listen to it and surround ourselves with the right people. And for most of us, it's a learning and a relearning before we really gain wisdom. And you had shared a story, I don't know if you're comfortable, maybe providing a 30,000 foot view, or that you had that aha moment, which really allowed you to start listening to that inner voice a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So, back up real quick at the beginning of the dialogue there, you talked about the law of attraction. And so many of us, we hinge on this positive speak or these mantras, but what we forget is that law of attraction is simply nothing more than recognizing and removing resistance. It's not about working. It's not about working towards something. It's not about calling something towards you. It's about removing the resistance between you and the desired object, right? And so, now kind of going to the story you were talking about, and for the sake of time, like you said, it was a celebration of life where I was down in Florida with a couple of friends, and there were several times that I got triggered in that, weekend. And number one was literally like the second day when one of my coworkers called me at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? And I was like, this motherfucker, God damn it, does he know I'm on vacation? Right? Triggered.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at that real quick. We'll take it step by step. It had nothing to do with this guy calling me at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? Which, by the way, was 6 o'clock his time because I was in Florida and I was an hour ahead, right? It had to do with me removing resistance. And the resistance was me allowing myself to take time off of work to go have fun. The resistance was me allowing myself to go down to Florida and spend the money to stay in a nice hotel and go out and drink and go out and party and go out and do all the things that, you're not supposed to do with your money if you're responsible, right? So resistance had nothing to do with that. So now fast forward into the trip, and one of the guys in our trip is, loud, obnoxious, abrasive, kind of a womanizer, takes advantage of his friends, right? Like would be at the bar, we're hanging out at the pool, and all of a sudden, there's three women hanging out with us, and everyone's drinking margaritas all day, and then we've got a bill for like $300 after a few hours, and dude's just skated out and gone, right? So it's like, man, what a dirty SOB, how cheap, how blah, but the reality is that the resistance wasn't in that. I just knew how to put lipstick on this pig, because at the end of the day, it was just simply a reflection of me. And so all those triggers on that trip really just caused me to look inside. And what I recognize is I was kind of a shitty dude, right? I had all this success externally on paper and it looked great, but it still wasn't the thing that made me happy. And so all of these things that I was getting triggered on were simply just reflections of my own shadows and my own demons. And the only reason those were so alive and so relevant in my being at that time is because I was simply trying to run away from myself and find solace in other things. Right? So I remember coming back from that trip, and I remember sitting in my wife's, at the time, kind of her home office. And I'm sitting there and I was meditating, or attempting to meditate. And we have this picture of my son from when he was like 2 years old. And it's just this beautiful black and white picture. And it's like his eyes are just beaming at me and staring at me. And I just remember in that moment, like having all the self-reflection and knowing that I had to go within, right? And that was kind of the start of the unraveling, if you will. That was kind of peeling back that first real layer.
Yeah.
I thought that I'd peeled back layers throughout the years, but I really hadn't. That was the first time that I saw myself really peeling back the layers. And what I learned throughout that whole process was, again, it wasn't about what I can add, and it wasn't, you know, how much can I meditate? How much can I do breath work? How much can I be mindful? Because to me, those things are just as much an attachment or a hinge as, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right?
Yep.
The reality is, if I can't get through my day without meditating, something else is controlling me, something externally, right? And so what I found is that now meditation is simply turned into an expression, right? It is something that I do. Some guys play the guitar, some guys draw and paint, some guys swing a golf club. Meditation is my expression. I enjoy it. What it allows me to do is have that mindfulness in that dialogue when, you know what, I'm having a conversation with Ali, but, you know, Ali hasn't shut up about his wife being on him for, you know, not taking out the trash. And I've heard this story 10 times today. Well, instead of me going, dude, shut the hell up, I'm tired of this story, what I recognize is that that story has a tie to it that he is needing to work through. And so now I can recognize it, either A, to give him space to work through it, or recognize where I can lend maybe some insight to help guide him, because if he's bringing it up, he's asking for it, right?
Wow.
So again, long answer.
No, this is
systematically, right?
Yeah, I knew when you and I, just for those that are listening in, when Dylan and I connected, you know, for the first time, we were supposed to have kind of a virtual coffee, you know, 15 to 30-minute conversation. I think we spoke for an hour and a half, talking about all sorts of things that are very interesting to you and I. I just want to back it up a little bit, you know, on what you just described, and thank you for sharing that. You know, is one, we've talked a couple times about the concept of mindfulness and what you know, Dylan and I know is the mirror technique, right? So for those that, you know, may not be aware, in being mindfulness is being mindful of what the other person might be going through, and not necessarily providing an attachment or responding to that circumstance, and seeing how can we provide some value in that situation. So a mirror technique, when we talk about that, is, you know, anything that is going to bother me personally outside of myself, because the one thing that I own fully is my emotions and my ability to react to anything that I'm facing in my life, right? So even through hardship, we could say this is an opportunity to learn, right? So this allows us to, you know, realize that when somebody else, we're going through an experience, even if it's negative, I can learn from that and I can gain value from that. What am I triggered by? What am I supposed to learn? What am I supposed to gain value from? You know, and that's what you had shared in this experience when, you know, somebody maybe did something inappropriate to you. You said, hey, you know, I need to take this within, right? And I did something very, very similar for myself personally, where you know, and I'll share this, you know, I support the Uncrushed, you know, organization online, which talks about kind of mental health, but, you know, a burnout situation where I was putting out a lot of these things altruistically and serving my family and others, but I lost my focus behind it. And I started to gain a lot of resentment behind these actions. And, you know, from the surface, they were good actions, but I think when you lose that value, that North Star, that intention, like you're talking about, your authentic self behind what you're doing, you can also lose a sense of self as well. And that's something that, you know, I had to kind of face and go deep within, and find a consistent routine. You know, as we talk about meditation and breath work. These are just tools that you could take out of your toolbox at certain stages of your life. So for me personally, I've had a love-hate relationship with meditation, mainly because through a big part of my journey was in nature, and I could literally stare in thoughtlessness for an hour, which is a form of meditation in essence. But I
Yes.
wasn't focusing on my breath work, right? I wasn't focusing on different layers of meditation, whether that's transcendental and otherwise. But meditation is critical, and you and I had talked about a consistent morning routine that we both really are, passionate about. And the reason we are so passionate about that was it allowed us to be our full authentic selves. And we
Yes.
realized through our personal journeys of A/B testing in the sales world, what worked and what didn't work, right?
Yeah.
And so for you and I, in the conversations we had, we put ourselves in a position to start very early to ensure we could be at our fullest for our clients, for our prospects, for our families, for ourselves. Maybe you could touch a little bit on how much of an impact your morning routine has had on you, and maybe some tactics on what you're including in those, and maybe I can include some of mine as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my morning routine is relatively baked, right? However, it's still very fluid. And the reason I say that is because we're constantly evolving. And when you look at our physical being, I think it's something like every 15 years, every cell in our body has been, what's the right word?
Regenerated, right?
Regenerated, right? I think the stomach lining is the lowest amount and bone is the longest, which is about 15 years. So when you look at that, we're constantly growing, right? And we're constantly evolving, constantly expanding. So, my morning routine, I review it every quarter, right?
Mm.
The 20 plus years, I take those things that I know and I incorporate it. And it's kind of back to the old philosopher conversation about loving wisdom, work, and knowledge, right? And so, for me, it's that morning routine can be evolving because as I change, I need it to change. But before that morning routine comes up, and it's not my routine, I'll share with you mine, but my routine is not yours, right? And here's how you get to your routine. It starts by going back to your authentic self. And that goes back to being vulnerable, right? And being vulnerable with who you are, what you know, what you don't know. For example, I'm a bad friend. Like on paper, I'm a bad friend. Like I return texts like 2 days later. I return emails like a week later. I don't answer calls. I mean, I'm a bad friend. I'm also a bad gift giver. Like Christmas, I get egg on my face every year, right? My son's birthday is the 24th. And then we've got Christmas. So we've got a lot going on at Christmas. And I was having a dialogue with my wife earlier today, and I said, you know what, 2020, I've got to get better at gifts. That's going to be my thing. That's what I'm focusing on. And she reminded me, I love it when she uses my own shit against me, right? She goes,
I'm going to give you one in a second.
Yeah, dude, you just gotta be good with what you're not good at.
Yeah.
She's like, you can't be good at everything, right? So here she goes eating, feeding me my own dog food. So in a nutshell, I think, once you're vulnerable to recognize what you're good, what you're not good at, right? Who you are, and you find that true authentic self, now comes the morning routine. And the morning routine is simply the framework, it's the work that you put behind to support that authentic self. So for example, I'm 46 years old. For 44 years, I was the Dylan that was derived from friends, from family, from parents, from church, from bosses, from TV, from newspapers, from magazines, from the guys I saw at the gym, to the guys I saw at the beach, to the guys I saw with the fancy suits and fancy cars, right? All of that input created this avatar that is Dylan. I don't know why I'm facing this way, by the way. I'm
giving us that side profile.
Yeah, you got the side profile. And then, back to that conversation with that trip to Florida, which was about 2 years ago, right? And it's been about 2 years that I've kind of, gone onto that journey deep beneath the cup. And so actually, Are you frozen? Can you hear me?
We're back now. Yeah.
Okay, good. So, it is finding that. And so the morning routine is a support mechanism for this guy. Because I had 44 years of, you know, saying stuff like, you ain't shit, Dylan. No one's going to listen to you, right? Or 44 years of stubbing my toe and saying things like, motherfucker, God damn it, Dylan, why are you so stupid? And you and I both know when you create those affirmations, right, with an emotional backing behind it, it sticks. So every time I stub my toe and I said those words,
Yeah.
well, then I go botch interviews and botch products, or botch interviews, botch processes, botch sales and things like that. Why? Because I'm a GD effing idiot. Right?
And guys, we're not going to get into all this today.
Yeah.
Mind, what you put out is what you call out to the universe, right? So what Dylan and I are talking about, we're not just talking about self-talk, which is important, it's critical, it's important, but we're talking about how we perceive things into the universe is what you plant out to the universe, right? So when my wife is often saying, God, I'm so tired today, I said, no, you got a day where you're gonna handle this today, right? I don't want any of that self-talk out there, right? So sorry to try.
No, you're good.
There, right?
So that morning routine, then, it really is just practice, right? That's why I look at it. It's practice. So the morning routine, just like when I go to the gym and I lift, right? I'm practicing to lift weights. They're going to break the muscles down. Then I'm going to rest. I'm going to eat. They're going to build up. Well, I'm practicing. So when I'm in meditation, I'm practicing that emptiness, right? So think about this. When I'm in meditation, I'm disconnected from mind and body, right? All the energy that it takes to do even just this right now, I'm reserving. So, it's funny because there was a piece of content that I put out about my morning routine, and I think you and I have talked about this before. I got a lot of hate because I don't sleep 8 hours a night. Well, when you're in this meditative state, and you can Google it, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, nor do I care to, because it's at our fingertips. But what I do know is I do know it's my truth. When I meditate, I'm so disconnected that I'm giving myself much needed energy back. So now I can sleep 6 hours a night, 5 hours a night, but still have enough energy to go do all the things that I need to do. And at the end of the day, still have energy for myself and my family. So that meditative state actually helps you to repair that gray matter in your brain. It actually allows you to get really deep rest in your body and in your spirit and in your mind, like if you were in REM sleep, right? Mm-hmm. So when I'm in that, number one, I'm getting charged up, right? Number two, when I am in that space of no thought, well, guess what? I'm not feeding that negative, right? Because so many times, even though we speak the positive affirmations, the negative in the subconscious, in the wiring, in the program, in the background is discounting anything that you say. You look in the mirror and you say, I'm beautiful, I'm strong. But for 44 years, I'm ugly and I'm weak.
Yep.
So the minute I say I'm beautiful and I'm strong, no, I'm really ugly and I'm weak. Now, how I combat that is in that morning routine, when I put my body through breath work, through meditation, and I put my mind into that theta state. Now, when I input those, right, affirmations, I'm beautiful and I'm strong, it speaks right to the subconscious. It speaks right to that greater part of us that's non-physical, that higher self, that true being. So in that morning routine, without going into specifics of it, right, for me, it's the pillars of emotional, spiritual, mindful, or mind, right, and body. Wow. So I'm taking in some context. We shared our admiration for folks like Dr. Wayne Dyer or Alan Watts, right? James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, one of my favorite books. There was one point in my morning routine where I listened to 10 minutes of that book every single day. It's a 52-minute audio. And for 3 months straight, I literally listened to that book every week in 10-minute increments, right? And so, you've got the clearing of the noise with the breath work. You've got the meditation. You've got the reprogramming. You've got the visualization, right? Then you've got all of the subconscious reprogramming. So there's a lot of layers to it. Now, back to my vulnerability and my true authentic self. My true authentic self is one that wants to share love and light. So my morning routine is built around that. If my true authentic self was like Warren Buffett, right, and I'm just going to be a financial gangster, part of my morning routine is probably going to be much like his, where he is spending time consuming content on financial stuff,
Mm.
right? So it really depends on what it is like your spirit is craving to
And
do
where you are, with
and
that
where you
stage of
are.
your life,
Yes.
right? So, and thank you for breaking that down. So, one thing I think you and I are both very passionate about is, for the folks that don't know, this is science now. This is not, just Eastern metaphysics and something we're into. 95% of our hardwiring, this computer program of ours, is baked in by the time you're 35 years old, right? So by the time you're 35 years old, 95% of us are being guided by some previously uh, determined belief system that we have. That's something that was an experience that, hard coded something in software speak into the programming, or it's a belief, something that we told ourselves. So to Dylan's point, you get to a certain age, I'm 42, we're in relative age, right? And if there is a belief system that we've been saying to ourselves all along, you're not good enough, you can't do that, you didn't grow up with that type of financial backing, whatever that story is, that's what your subconscious is going to believe, even if you have those affirmations in the morning, like I do and you do, which is I am well, I am loving, I'm healthy, I'm abundant, whatever those might be. It takes repetition and repetition and repetition before we can reprogram and push the update, so to speak, into our programming. So it's really, really important as we look at things like meditation as a practice, that we find ways to implement those into our lives. And I think there's reasons why, for me, I get obsessed with what are the greats doing, great-minded people, great leaders, authors, whatever that might be. They're all following some type of practice. And I think I was fairly lucky in a different life. I worked with, Master Wong. I failed to remember his first name. He was a Buddhist master out of San Francisco. And I got to spend time with him and drink tea with him, and just to, kind of enjoy relation. And he said, most people think that meditation is sitting on a hill quietly, focusing on your breath work. And it can be that, not to say it's not. But meditation isn't everything that you do. And I'll share a story where you said, like somebody you love putting something back on you. We just had a Thanksgiving, a month or so ago, and we had to, we were assigned for a salad, a pomegranate salad my wife wanted to make. So we go to Sprout to pick up all the supplies, and I, of course, want to grab the tub of pre-cut pomegranate, yeah. Right? That's what I want. My wife says, no, fresh, organic, go grab two pomegranate, because I know what's going to happen the next day. My wife's going to be running late, and I'm going to be stuck there cutting up this pomegranate in my white shirt, which I don't want to do. Yep. So as I'm cutting up, because the reason I share this with you, yep, meditation isn't everything you do. So when I'm washing dishes, when I'm folding laundry, it's very meditative to me. When I vacuum the house, I alter that mind state and I make it meditation. I focus on my box breathing as I'm doing these things, where every shirt looks like I worked at the Gap when I never worked at the Gap. My laundry is perfectly, folded, like a professional is, so on and so forth. So as I'm, mumbling to myself, cutting up this pomegranate, the next day, because yes, we are running late, my wife turns over to me and says, well, why are you frustrated? If everything is meditation, you should be able to meditate with your pomegranate. And, she was right. I did not want to hear that, right? It's great when your family members throw your messages back on your face. And as we're driving to Thanksgiving lunch, my wife says, how come you didn't say anything to me? And she says, I was right, wasn't I? I says, yes, you were 100%, because meditation is in everything we do. So the reason I go into this weird story about pomegranate is it's very important for us to have these consistent practices, but it's very easy to, take a moment. I think you have a practice where you set your alarm several times throughout your day just to focus on gratitude. What I've started to do is implement box breathing every other hour on the hour. And for those that don't know, box breathing is a technique that, is, most meditators know. Navy SEALs have used it as well. It's where you focus on a period of time, let's say 4 minutes, which I think is a standard, and you take a deep breath in 4 seconds, you hold for 4 seconds, and then you exhale for 4 seconds, and you do that for a period of 4 minutes. I've started to implement this just into my day, and it's been huge impact as well. So,
yeah, absolutely. But I would I would say that, it's again back to that conversation that we were having a little while ago about being careful on hinging too much of the power on that external factor. Again, whether it is booze, sex, right, drugs, rock and roll, or meditation or breathing, right? Because there have been times where I wake up and I push my meditation to later, and I find myself stressing or obsessing about meditating. Right? I'm like, oh shit, I gotta meditate. Oh man, it's 9 o'clock. Okay, I didn't meditate. I meditated at 10:30. Got my office set, the blinds are closed, the candles are lit, right? Then 10:30 comes around, I don't meditate. And then it's like 3 o'clock, and I was like, oh man, I didn't meditate. And what I found is that all this freaking focus on meditation has done exactly the thing that meditation is supposed to do. And now I've actually done the opposite. I wasn't in the present moment. And so what I've learned is that, like you said, it just becomes a part of who you are. Again, it's living knowledge. It's knowledge in motion, right? It's that, listen, I can't get 10, 20, 30 minutes of that buzzing feeling, but right now in this moment, I recognize that I'm being a little bit frazzled. So let me breathe, let me calm everything down. That in itself is probably more powerful than sitting on the mountaintop meditating for 45 minutes, right? Because the reality of it is on the mountaintop in the Om position, right? To the beautiful sunset or the sunrise, anyone can do that.
Mm.
Can you do it in the middle of the day when shit is hitting the ceiling? That's it. Can you continue to stay in the eye of the storm, right? And so it becomes that move in meditation. And so one of my favorite authors is, I think I'm saying it right, Thich Nhat Hanh,
Yep.
the Vietnamese author. And I think a lot of his writings were probably throughout the 50s and 60s. I might be really off on my stuff, but
You're pretty close. I think a big part of his movement, because I've listened to him recently. He talks a lot about having conversations with Martin Luther King during the civil rights.
Perfect,
So
right?
I think 50 to 70 is probably a good stage when I remember his readings as well.
He put out a little series of pocket, I guess you call them little pocket books, and I thought I had it around here somewhere, but I didn't. These little books that are probably, this size, right? Each. And it's a great little box series, and it literally is, how to eat, how to love, how to walk, how to sit. And the premise of each one is exactly that. It's when you walk, walk. When you eat, you eat. And I remember, a year and a half ago when I first went down for new hire training in my job. And after like the second day, everyone kind of got a flavor of dial-in, right? And so I had people walking up to me and saying things like, man, how long have you been Buddhist? And how long have you been practicing Buddhism and this and that? And I go, man, not once did I say to anyone that I'm Buddhist, right? But I think what they recognize is some bits and pieces. And while I do resonate with it a lot, because I love that philosophy, I don't know that there's necessarily one label, right? But it was in particular after we'd eaten lunch. And so I remember having a dialogue with, I think it was Mike was the guy's name. And I said, well, I guess, you're right. Maybe I do practice Buddhism. I go, but it's simply just because I want to practice the art of being here, enjoying it. I go, at lunchtime, where did you fit? He said, I sat at a table with the rest of the class. I said, how many people are at the table? 10, 12. He goes, what did you guys do? We talked about the class. We talked about what we're going to do tonight. We talked about our territories. We talked about anything. I go, did you eat? He goes, oh, yeah, we ate really, really fast. And then we got out of there. And I said, well, what were you doing? Weren't you sitting at the table to eat? Right? And I said, what do you think I do when I go sit by myself over in a corner? He goes, I don't know. I just figured you just don't like being around people. I said, no, I eat. I eat without distraction.
Yeah.
That's it. And that in itself, like you said, is meditation, right? But again, had I been in a place where I got so flustered that I couldn't go eat by myself and I had to sit with the crowd, that could have been just as adversely the opposite, right? So I think sometimes we put a little bit too much into that. And that's why I really love like that meditation piece and that breathwork piece, just incorporated into the day, into who you are. And again, before there's anything else, there's discipline. So thus the alarms, right? Set up the alarm to remind you right? Set up the alarm, and then maybe set an anchor with the alarm, right? And then maybe you don't need an alarm. Maybe you just click a finger and it reminds you to breathe. Then
Yeah.
maybe every time you see the sun, you're reminded to breathe. And so then all summer you're outside just breathing up a storm, just living in the present moment. And it's the best summer you ever had, right?
Wow.
It's literally taking it one step at a time, and eventually it becomes your norm.
Wow. No, a lot of people have been real high on James Clear's Atomic Habits book this year. I was as well. I really enjoyed it. It talks about, I don't know if you've had a chance to read it. It talks about the compounding effect. So a big portion of the book is on multi-wins, small wins, to get yourself gain momentum. A lot of people set goals for towards the end of the year, so it's goal setting time, but without the process in place, as we're talking about, a mindful process,
Yes.
you're not going to be able to implement those things as well. So, but one thing he had talked about was also the diminishing return of multitasking, which often is looked at as a positive trait, and data continues to show now that you actually get less done because of the quality of what you're doing. And even for me personally, I used to block out on my calendar lunch plus master your craft, which would be a period where I'd read a professional book. I don't read a lot of sales books, but in the middle of the day is when I like to read, more sales podcasts and books. And I realized, it's probably I should just focus on eating. So now I've taken the time, to your point, and I don't read a book. I just try to be present with my meal, or now because I work from home, try to be present with my wife and take advantage of these little periods of time and pockets, right? So these things truly matter. So some of the topics we're talking about, guys, might seem very, very silly, right? But when we talk about people buy from people they like, I think that we need to up level that statement in sales and customer service and marketing, where people connect better with people that are more authentic, right? And I think that's an area where I'm starting to see a big push here, as well. So for me personally as well, it's very similar to you. I probably give too much weight to my morning workout, right? If I'm not working out in the morning, it kind of throws everything off. But I think Bruce Lee said it best when we say be like water. From an energetic perspective, I think it's really important to give things a priority, but not power. If that makes any sense.
Well, what's nice about it, it goes back to what you were talking about, that book that you said, it's Atomic what?
Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits. It's celebrating those little wins. And so part of the thing with the morning routine is it sets you up for little wins. So for example, in that piece of content that I shared with you that I got a lot of hate from, there were people that called out, "Oh, great job, Dylan. You celebrate a win by having coffee." And I go, "Fuck yes, I do. I celebrate every win, bro." Like,
yeah.
I wake up with that alarm. Number two, I poured a cup of coffee. Yes, that's a win. Guess what? The result is a magical freaking life. So guess what? If you don't want to celebrate your win, your cup of coffee, go. So be it. I'm going to celebrate mine, right? So it's like literally, waking up, coffee, breath work, meditation. Now with the cold weather, I go outside and I do 2 minutes of breath work in my boxers to get a cold blast and use the
All right. You go with that pattern interrupt.
Yes, exactly. The pattern interrupt. And then the workout, and then sauna. And then literally by the time I walk into the house, that's the whole idea. It's the momentum. It's that 5 to 7 wins that I've got. So now when I'm sitting with you, I'm in a great state. When I'm sitting with my clients, great state. My boss, great state. My friends, great state. Whoever. So that just builds, man. And so many of us in life, we wait for the promotion, the marriage, the baby, the new car, right? We look for all these things to celebrate. And the reality is we have things we can celebrate every single day. And guess what? Winning is not something you do. It's a habit. And how do you create the habit? By winning, by celebrating the little wins. And all of a sudden, now you're not just celebrating little wins. You literally go from celebrating, I got the toothpaste on the toothbrush without dropping it into the sink. Because isn't that the worst thing when you're getting ready to brush and all the toothpaste falls off? So you learn to celebrate little things like that. And then all of a sudden, when money's just falling out of the sky and clients and job offers and amazing experiences just come out of nowhere, you're used to it. It becomes your norm because you've learned to celebrate wins. And what you feed grows. So now I'm celebrating wins. The universe is going to give me more wins to celebrate.
Wow. No, and people might think it's silly, but you're right on the money. Because guys, think about it. When you're in a we all know that feeling of a new relationship, that high school sweetheart relationship, and you're feeling giddy and you're feeling happy, and nothing can impact your mood, and you go about the day. Now, what I want you to do is double that feeling, because love and happiness sit at almost 50% of gratitude. And when we're talking about doubling the impact the universe will give us, these are those micro wins of gratitude we're talking about. And it might seem silly, but when we look at those top performers, they're implementing these things into their life, and they're following those things as well, right?
So think of it this way. It's very, very basic, but just to kind of help you wrap your head around it. If I'm in a bad mood and someone cuts me off in line, someone cuts in line at Starbucks, gets between me and my peppermint mocha latte, right? And I'm in a bad mood, and I've been having this negative self-dialogue, and I've been a victim all morning. And I'm going to tap you on the shoulder and be like, hey, dude, what the hell, bro? Like, I've been standing here for 5 minutes. Who gives you the right? Then we start becoming victims, right? We get caught in the story. And the problem is we're not caught in the story that's happening. We're actually caught up in stories that have happened. And this was the trigger that brought us back to that place. So me yelling at you has nothing to do with you, right?
Yes.
That's a completely different story in itself. But the flip side is, if I'm celebrating my wins and I'm celebrating me and I'm in that mood and I've got that positive flow going, and you cut me off, I simply think, dude, that dude may be freaking crashing really hard right now and he just needs some coffee. If I'm even thinking at all, right?
Yeah.
If I'm even thinking at all. But if I have that space and I'm cool with it, and I just happen to tap you on the shoulder afterwards and be like, hey man, what are you ordering? And we just start talking. Wouldn't you know, man, I would not be surprised if you're exactly the guy that I've been looking for, that has a skill set to help me finish my project. I wouldn't be surprised if you're the guy that's looking for someone with my skill set to fulfill a high ticket offering that I'm putting out. I wouldn't be surprised if you're the guy that's, over the speaker bureau that's planting speakers in conferences all over the state. And I could have said, F you, a-hole, or I could have stood there, shook your hand, introduced myself, have a dialogue, and now all of a sudden you're like, well, you know what, darling, we do need a speaker. As a matter of fact, I need a speaker for 10 shows. Sign right here. Like, that is the alchemy of life. And that's why being vulnerable, being authentic, having gratitude, having appreciation, those things are so important, because they give you the ability to see the things that you think you need a crystal ball for. But the reality is, we don't need a crystal ball. All we need to do is, just like when you look at that crystal ball and the kind of smoke and the vapor clears out and you see this clear image of your future, well, guess what? Get rid of the smoke, get rid of the noise, get rid of the crap in here, and you will have a very clear picture of your future.
Wow, that's money, Dylan. I know we're getting close on time. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me, Dylan Ali, D-Y-L-A-N, last name Ali, A-L-I, on LinkedIn. You find me on Instagram, Dylan D-A Ali, so D-Y-L-A-N-D-A Ali. Those are the two platforms that I'm using today. Come January, I have a good feeling that I'll launch YouTube, and so I'll take a lot of the content from LinkedIn and use that platform there to just reach other folks. And then tuning into you, man. Right? Tuning into you as well.
Now, before we sign off, what's one piece of advice you might have for, younger professionals, older tenured professionals that are trying to have better balance in their life? I don't like the term work-life balance or integration. I just think it's balance in general, as you and I are talking about. But if there's one area going into 2020 that you'd say, hey, if this is an area you could really focus on, it's really going to help you when you're dealing with these situations. And before you answer, the reason I love this topic is because one of my greatest influences was Yogananda, right? And he wrote a book called Autobiography of a Yogi. And his mentor said to him, the true sense of spiritual intelligence is not to do it in calm, but to do it in the midst of chaos. And you had touched on this briefly. So I'd love to get one piece of advice that you might have to share with the audience today.
Yes. Become the warrior tending garden. Right? Become the warrior tending garden. The warrior fights these fierce battles. The warrior emerges victorious. The warrior knows how to win and knows how to get said desired outcome. But if you choose to be in the garden, you know that the magic is not in fighting. The magic is simply in pulling weeds.
Wow.
When you pull the weeds, you allow the good stuff to surface. And how do you get there? You get there by forgetting what you knew a minute ago and not anticipating what's about to come in the next minute and standing firmly in this minute. And how do you do that? You do that by finding your breath. So be a warrior tending garden by finding your breath in the present moment. And if you'll allow me, I'll give you a quick little, what I call a Band-Aid, quick little walkthrough to help you find that warrior in the garden. Because many of us want to be a warrior all the time. That just, that's another conversation, right? So let's de-escalate that fight or flight mode that we're in all the time, from wanting to be the warrior to fight with our boss, to fight with our spouse, to fight with our peers, to fight with our competition, right? And let's learn how to pull the weeds of the mind. You with me?
I'm with you.
All right, so let's go.
All right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to do the pranayama breathing like you just talked about, right? A yogi breath. So a couple of things to keep in mind is that we're going to breathe with our nose only. So no mouth breathing, right? The chest will not rise, so it's not a big chest, right? Chest stays relatively flat. It's belly. So you have one of those little donut things for the swimming pool around your belly. When you inhale, you're blowing it up. And when you exhale, you're squeezing all the air out. Now, the more air you can squeeze out, the more effective the technique, right? So there's a Japanese study that's done. We'll give you the logistics behind it. 6 is the number. Six is the magic number. 6 deep breaths, that pranayama style. I think you called it maybe 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out. So the shift in this is going to be a 2-to-1 ratio. For every second I inhale, I'm going to exhale 2x. Make sense? All right. So 3 is a number that I've found that most people are good with. The better you get, just like if you were to do a pyramid set on a workout, you can do a pyramid set and move up. But we're going to go with 3. So the game is we're going to hold for 3 seconds. We're going to inhale 3 seconds. We're going to hold 1 second. We're going to exhale. What's going to happen physiologically is that breath work is going to activate the parasympathetic system, which is going to activate the vagus nerve, which is responsible for releasing the calming chemicals. Make sense? Right? By the way, I just made all that up. All right, so here we go. I'm going to facilitate, so I'm just going to keep a little notch on my pad here, and we're going to go 6, and I'm going to have you follow. So you're in great alignment, spine is straight, you're sitting upright. Feel free to close your eyes if you'd like. If not, just kind of relax your body and just focus on that breath. Are we ready? All right. So the command is going to be inhale, hold, exhale. Simple, right? Ready? Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Belly, not chest. Remember, inhale, belly, 1, 2, 3. Good. Hold, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Close your eyes and inhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Hold, exhale, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And open your eyes. How do you feel?
Refreshed, man.
Right? So here's a real life example of how you can use this. You're late for a meeting. Meeting starts at 1 o'clock. You show up, it's 1:05. you're scrambling, you're getting your keys, you're getting your stuff, you rush into the meeting. Now you walk in and it's, 1:15. Now you finally get started and it's 1:25. And if you're lucky and if you're really good, you get 35 minutes to wow your audience, to wow your prospect, to wow your client, right? Imagine this. You show up, you're 5 minutes late. Turn the car off, put the windows up, turn off the radio. 6 deep breaths. That took every bit of what? Maybe a minute?
Mm-hmm.
So now you're 6 minutes late. You walk in. Now you're 8 minutes late. You simply walk in and you say, Allie, I apologize for being tardy. I know your time is very valuable. With your permission, I'd love for us to get started. We good? Yep, we get started. Now you've got 50 minutes of right now, right here, in the present moment, the very best Dylan, the very best Allie, the very best whoever. Now you've connected, right? And even more so, you've impressed the heck with your IQ and your EQ both to your client, because what they're used to is someone coming in and blah, right? Now you've shown that this is why they want to do business with you. And that's one quick little thing that you can do for anyone young in their career, middle career, older in their career. Because guess what? You're old in your career, you're working towards retirement. If you're middle of your career, you're working towards the peak of your career. If you're young in your career, you just want to be like the other guys. And the message in that is just stop and appreciate where you are right now. Because let me tell you, there will be one day where you will be at the top of the mountain, and that's great. But man, don't forget the climb. Don't forget the struggle. Don't forget the missed footsteps. Don't forget where your hand slips on a rock. Don't forget any of the bruises that you get along the way. Because those bruises, those bumps, those calluses, listen, if you cannot navigate $100 goof up, you're not going to be able to navigate $1 million goof up. So for me, that journey and those pieces and the heartaches that we all have and we all experience, those are the things that help build us to make that mountaintop so much better. And then the reality is when you get to the mountaintop, you go, the mountaintops really isn't that special, because physically I'm here, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally, I've been here all along. And that's how you do it, is by starting from where you are. And the only way to start from where you are is to, number one, recognize where you are. And most of us are anywhere but in this present moment.
But right here.
Yeah.
Man, Dylan, this has been great. And hopefully, everybody who's listening, you're getting some value out of here, right? Often when we set these goals, these summits, these peaks, we lose sight of them, or even when we attain them, something is lacking, as you mentioned, because we're not actually in the present. We are only able at any given time to live in kind of a primal or a powerful state. So it's really important when we are trying to focus on living in that conscious, present, powerful state, we take a step back. Imagine the impact that Dylan just described, going into that boardroom, running late, having the context and the mental awareness to own that room versus being frazzled, and how that's going to resonate with the other people in that boardroom. Really appreciate this conversation. For those that haven't, please go follow Dylan Ali. Look for his launch on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And for those that are listening, please like, comment, and share and subscribe. Appreciate you guys chiming in today. Look forward to connecting on the next one.
Thank you, Mom.